Hi everyone, in this video I would talk about neuron, the structural and functional unit of our brain. So this is the cover video for my whole playlist where I would discuss about several properties of the neuron to a functional circuit and also describe some aspect of brain physiology. Now here is our very well-known diagram for neuron, and this diagram we are very familiar with. We have seen this diagram from our school and college level textbooks. So just to describe this diagram, you have a lot of dendrites at this end, and dendrites are branches of the neuron, and in the cell body it is actually the central hub of all sort of synthesis or other stuff, and axon is the terminal through which the neuronal impulse, the electrical impulse, travels. But this diagram is pretty old. This kind of model is pretty old. So let's just reject this concept, because earlier in 1906 Camillo Golgi and Santiago Ramon y Cajal get their Nobel Prize to describe several aspects of the neuronal morphology. And from Santiago Ramon y Cajal's drawing, you can clearly see that neuron comes in several different vivid morphologies. Then why should we restrict ourselves to that one textbook image? That's why here is an image of GFP tag neurons of the cerebral cortex. Look how beautiful they look like. So let's just change our view to a view like this. So these are typical pyramidal neurons of the cerebral cortex. Now if we zoom in, we see at any point of time a neuron is receiving inputs from quite a lot of other neurons. And when the neuron gets the impulses, it is getting processed by the postsynaptic neuron. Here you can see the junction between the neurons are called synapses. So what happens at the synapses? At the synapses there are voltage gated calcium channels, here in green. And also in the postsynaptic membrane there are receptors which are basically ligand gated ion channels, which opens or close when ligand binds and closes when ligand is not bound. So these red colored dots represents the neurotransmitters. So when our action potential reaches the nerve terminal, there is rapid influx of calcium, and ultimately it leads to neurotransmitter release in the synaptic cleft, and the neurotransmitter binds to the postsynapse and thereby causing depolarization in the postsynapse. Now when the depolarization reaches a threshold, the postsynaptic neuron fires another action potential. Now have you ever wondered, why does our nervous system at all need a synapse? If it need to transfer information, it can use only one long cable. Why it need a synapse? A possible answer could be for better regulatory mechanisms. The synapse are the places where huge regulatory mechanisms takes place. And synapses are pretty interesting because with environmental experiences and environmental exposure, the synapses could change. The strength, the weight of the synapses could change. So the synapses are very dynamic in nature. And also it's a puzzle that how action potential can release the vesicles. All these things I would be discussing in my subsequent videos. Now this is a typical cell which has a nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi, mitochondria, other cell organelles, etc. Neurons from a cell biological aspect have that all of those. But how neuron is different from a normal cell from a cell biological aspect? From a functional aspect, neuron is pretty different from a normal cell. Think about this. A neuron synthesizes some amount of protein and these proteins are marked by these green, yellow boxes, and these protein need to be specifically delivered to this branch, or let's say this branch. So neuron has to devise a way by which it can send this to this specific branch. How difficult this task could be, because one neuron could have thousands of branches, and on the thousands of branches there could be 10,000 synapses. So this task is incredibly difficult, but still neuron can perform this kind of task pretty efficiently. So this is a mystery in neuroscience, how this kind of differential transport happens. So this kind of specialized properties of neurons differentiate them from a normal cell. Now, neuron doesn't stay in isolation. Instead, neurons are part of a functional circuit. Neurons take input from the environment or from other different neurons, process them to give rise to an output. So, question is how neuron can code for several different sensory modalities like olfaction, like vision, like auditory cues, or like specific touch, etc. Now, neuron uses specific firing patterns sometimes to code for information. For example, this neuron uses this kind of firing pattern. Maybe this kind of firing pattern could be for one kind of stimulus. Maybe it can use another firing pattern for another kind of stimulus, or for a different intensity of the same stimulus. Also, it can use a different bursting regime to encode information. Neuron can code information by changing the firing rate, or changing the firing frequency, or changing the interspike interval. All these changes could lead to a functional change that could code a different information altogether. So these are very interesting aspects, how neuron can code for several functionalities. In my subsequent videos, I would be talking about all these things in details. Now, neuron is different from other cells in many aspects. One of the important aspects is that neuron's membrane is decorated with several different ion channels. These ion channels comprise of voltage-gated sodium channel, voltage-gated potassium channel, some leak potassium channels, and also sodium-potassium ion exchange pump. So many ion channels are only found in neurons, and these ion channels are several different type, and also they have different properties to play. For example, a mammalian neuron has hundreds of different voltage-gated potassium, several different voltage-gated potassium channel, and also different varieties of leak potassium channel. Each of that give rise to specific coding function. Now, neuron use different coding scheme for propagation of the information. Definitely, it uses action potential. Action potential is a mode of propagation of information which is all or none in nature. That means it's a binary way of transforming information. Apart from that, neuron use a graded potential for propagating the information. And graded potential is also very important like action potential, because graded potential can give rise to specific advantages for a functional circuit to code information. And all these things I would be discussing in my subsequent videos. Also, neuronal membrane could be modeled like a RC circuit, where a portion of the membrane could be modeled as a combination of capacitor and resistor. The differential charges in the two sides of the neuronal membrane works like a parallel plate of a capacitor, and the phospholipid bilayer is just like a dielectric, and several ion channels are just like conductances, or they work like a resistor. So that is how neuronal membrane is very different, and could be modeled like a circuit. As neuron could be modeled like a circuit, functional RC circuit has differential operation paradigm. Some could work as a differentiator, some could work as an integrator. A functional neuron in a circuit also has this kind of different operational paradigm, which I will be discussing later. Now, neurons are not only cells, they are cells with specialized properties. They constitute a functional network, which ultimately forms our brain. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like my video, give it a quick thumbs up. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And please watch the subsequent videos to gain better knowledge in neurobiology. Thank you.